somewhere within the first 5 minutes of this match, I get concussed.
I never knew that.
I don't even remember this night.
The Undertaker picks his 5 greatest wrestlers of all time. The arena lights went dark at 9:47 p.m. Not because of a power failure, not because of a pyrotechnics cue, because a man in a black hat had decided it was time. 60,000 people stopped breathing. That is the only introduction Mark Calaway has ever needed. He spent 33 years inside a squared circle, accumulating a body of work so methodical, so structurally deliberate, that even his peers struggled to describe it without borrowing the language of mythology. But mythology is a shortcut. What Calaway built was something more specific and more uncomfortable than myth. He built a standard. And then he spent 3 decades watching other men fail to meet it. The question was never whether The Undertaker was great. The question was who he considered great enough to acknowledge. He has given that answer exactly once. There is a recording, not widely circulated, of a 1997 backstage exchange at a house show in Wheeling, West Virginia. No cameras, no production crew, just 2 men in a corridor after a match that had gone 18 minutes longer than scheduled. One of them, soaked through his ring gear, said to the other, "You never stop thinking out there, do you?" The other man smiled and said nothing. He just picked up his bag and walked toward the exit. The man asking the question was Shawn Michaels. What Michaels was really asking, what everyone in that locker room eventually asked, was how Calaway processed consequence faster than other men processed sensation. How he could be executing a move while already 3 decisions ahead. How he could read a crowd's silence the way a conductor reads a rest in sheet music. Not as absence, but as the most loaded moment in the piece. That capacity for patience under pressure, for knowing exactly when to withhold, is the prism through which Calaway evaluated greatness. Not championships, not crowd reactions, not even match quality in the conventional sense. He looked for men who understood that professional wrestling's deepest craft was not physical. It was psychological architecture. 5 men, across 5 decades, met that standard. The first is the one nobody argues with, which should make everyone suspicious. Ric Flair spent the 1980s building a character so internally consistent that it functioned as both armor and confession. The robes, the hair, the figure 4, these were not affectations. They were load-bearing structures in a persona that had to survive 250 nights a year on the road, in towns that were not interested in nuance. Flair gave them spectacle. But what he smuggled inside the spectacle was craft. Calaway has spoken about watching Flair work a crowd in 1991. Not the finish, not the big spots, but the middle section of a match in Charlotte, where Flair did almost nothing for 4 consecutive minutes. He paced, he stalled, he complained to the referee. The crowd, instead of disengaging, grew louder. They hated him more precisely because he was making them wait. Calaway said he studied that 4 minutes longer than he studied most men's entire careers. Flair's influence on Calaway's understanding of pacing was not incidental. It was foundational. What the career record shows: 21 NWA World Heavyweight Championship reigns, a run that stretched from 1972 to a retirement that never quite held, is less interesting than what it conceals. Flair understood, before most, that the audience's relationship with a performer was not built on peaks. It was built on the sustained, almost imperceptible accumulation of expectation. He did not give people what they wanted. He made them want it harder. The second selection carries more weight than any championship could explain. Steve Austin did not save professional wrestling. That framing is too clean, too convenient, What Austin did was more complicated. He redirected it while the industry was already redirecting itself, and the collision produced something neither side had fully planned. The character that emerged from the wreckage of a fired phone call in 1996 delivered infamously while Austin was laid up with a tricep injury was not a creative decision. It was a man with nothing left to lose speaking directly into a microphone. Calaway has described Austin as the most dangerous performer he ever shared a card with. Not dangerous in the physical sense, though Austin's physicality was legitimate, but dangerous in the sense that he could not be predicted. Every other elite-level performer in that era had a ceiling, a place where the performance became a performance again, where the construct was visible. Austin never found that ceiling, or if he did, he punched through it before the audience could register the impact. Their WrestleMania matches, the 1998 main event in particular, were not two performers executing a pre-agreed script. They were two men at the precise intersection of their physical and psychological limits, using those limits as the actual material of the match. What the audience watched was not simulated conflict. It was real exhaustion producing genuine drama. Austin's neck was already compromised that night. The match went 28 minutes. Nobody knew how it would end, including, reportedly, the two men in the ring. The third man is the one Calaway names that silences rooms. Shawn Michaels never had Austin's menace or Flair's structural discipline. What Michaels had was something harder to categorize and, ultimately, harder to replicate, an almost pathological commitment to emotional honesty inside the artificial framework of a professional wrestling match. He did not perform feeling. He arrived at it in real time, inside the performance, and the audience could feel the difference even when they could not articulate it. The psychological cost of that approach was not hidden. By 1997, Michaels was disintegrating in public. The personal conduct, the political maneuvering, the relationship with Bret Hart that ended in Montreal in a moment that nobody has ever fully agreed on. These were not separate from Michaels' greatness. They were part of the same circuit. The same wire that made him incapable of giving a dishonest performance also made him incapable of governing himself off the canvas. Calaway's selection of Michaels is, in part, an acknowledgement of that cost. He has said that Michaels was the only man he ever worked with who made him feel uncertain during a match. Not unsafe, not unprepared, but genuinely uncertain, as if the outcome were not yet decided. That sensation, manufactured at the highest level, is the rarest thing professional wrestling produces. Their last match, at WrestleMania 26, was announced as a retirement stipulation. Michaels lost. He did not work another match for 8 years. The ending was not a creative device. It was a diagnosis. The fourth selection answers the question everyone has been asking. Mick Foley held 3 different characters simultaneously across the same career. Mankind, Cactus Jack, Dude Love, and the psychological architecture required to maintain that without collapsing into self-parody is not adequately appreciated. What is even less appreciated is what those characters were built on. Foley took physical punishment to a degree that was not theater and was not, strictly speaking, sanity. He fell from a cage in 1998 and was back in the ring within minutes. He had 2 teeth driven through his lip and continued the match. Calaway does not praise Foley's willingness to absorb punishment. He has said, carefully, that Foley understood something specific, that the audience's threshold for belief is not exceeded by skill. It is exceeded by evidence. And Foley was the only man willing to provide evidence at a cost nobody else would pay. The long-term accounting for that decision is visible in how Foley moves today. The knees, the shoulder, the cumulative toll of a career built on controlled sacrifice. What the audience received across those years was the product of a transaction Foley entered with full awareness. He knew the price. He paid it anyway. Calaway's selection of him is, quietly, a statement about what commitment actually looks like when stripped of romance. The fifth name is the one that reframes the entire list. Andre the Giant did not wrestle matches. He presided over them. By the time Calaway entered the industry in the late 1980s, Andre was already past his physical peak. The acromegaly had advanced, the movement had slowed, the body had become something that worked against rather than for the craft. And yet every room Andre entered reorganized itself around him. Not because of his size, though the size was real and irreducible. Because Andre had built, over 2 decades, a presence so fully inhabited that even its deterioration carried authority. Calaway has spoken about watching Andre during what would be his final years. Watching how he managed a crowd, managed a match, managed the distance between what his body could do and what the audience needed to believe. He said it looked effortless. He said he knew it was not. The lesson Calaway absorbed from Andre had nothing to do with technique or physicality. It was about the relationship between longevity and truth. Andre's presence in a ring was credible, not because of what he could still do, but because of everything the audience had already filed away about him. 30 years of accumulated evidence, walking into frame. What Calaway understood, and what this list, taken as a whole, documents, is that greatness in this industry is not a moment. It is not a match. It is not even a career. It is the specific weight a performer leaves on an audience's understanding of what is real, long after the performance has ended. 5 men, across 5 decades, changed what the audience was willing to believe. Mark Calaway spent 33 years making sure nobody forgot what belief costs,